Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night, and we got a lot of very interesting updates. First, let's start with Orekhov area, because according to the information we have, the Russians launched the counteroffensive operation in this area. It's just a local counteroffensive operation, not something big that Ukrainians tried to implement during June and July, but just a small local attacks. And according to information we have, the Russians are attacking in direction of the trenches in the fields on the south of Novodanilovka, this settlement, and trying to return the first defense belt on the north of Robotyno. So basically the Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to step back from these trenches and from these trenches that located and on the east north of Robotyno, and of course to force the Ukrainians to step back from this area. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the Russians have already launched a small reconnaissance operation yesterday. There were a few clashes, and as a result of those clashes the Russians have already returned some fields in this area. The main purpose of this attack is to force the Ukrainians to step back, and as I understand, the Russians are pretty successful in implementation of this operation. The thing is that the Ukrainians, after 2 months of bloody clashes in June-July, have lost a lot of forces, significant number of armored vehicles, infantry and troopers. Furthermore, the Russians launched another offensive operation in direction of Kupiansk and Kupiansk area, and that also forced the Ukrainians to send some reinforcements in reserve in that direction. So basically, as I understand, the Russian reconnaissance intelligence have analyzed the entire situation and made the conclusion that Ukrainians don't have enough of manpower and just the power to keep and to hold the area on the north of Novodanilovka, on the south of Novodanilovka and the north of Robotyno. So that's why the Russians launched this attack. Furthermore, another wave of attack the Russians tried to implement from Novopokrovka in direction of Malotakmachka. In this direction as well, trying to force the Ukrainians also to leave the fields that they managed to capture as a result of June and July offensive operation. So this is the Russians direction of attack. And today we got the first video confirmations that as a result of fierce clashes and fightings, the Russians managed to capture another Bradley. Almost correct Bradley, just a few things probably were damaged, but anyway, according to the author of this video, the Russians are able to fix and to repair this type of weapon, and basically they have already evacuated this armored vehicle from the fields in the vicinity of Malotakmachka. So we understand that this is the first results of the Russian offensive operation. So as you can see, the Russians attack from the south in direction of Novodanilovka and from the east in direction of Malotakmachka. I must say that for now we see just a small local offensive operation. Probably there is nothing to worry about, but one more time, if the Ukrainians lost significant number of armored vehicles and forces during June and July, there is a very high chances that the Russians will try to proceed and will try to develop their offensive operation, and if it possible even to start attacking of settlements like Malotakmachka and of course Novodanilovka. Everything depends on the situation, and we will follow this situation, of course. Now we move further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. The situation is in this area develops in the Ukrainian favor. The Russian sources reported that this night the Ukrainians made another attempt to attack the Urozhaine settlement, and as a result, after of course significant artillery preparation during the previous night, the Ukrainians were bombing and shelling this settlement, and after that preparation the Ukrainians have already entered the northern part of that settlement. The Russians of course still try to control this the central and the southern part of Urozhaine. The Ukrainians are trying to dig deeper in this northern part. Now, as I understand, we need to expect another attempt to attack from the Ukrainian side from Staromayorskaya, and the Ukrainians will, by this attack, the Ukrainians will try to pin down and to freeze the Russian forces in the central and the southern part of Urozhaine, while the northern forces will try to dig in deeper on the northern part of that settlement. Of course, the Russians will follow the situation, and if something goes wrong, they will start offensive operation in direction of Urozhaina from the south, trying to pin down and to slow down the Ukrainian forces in the settlement. But for example, today we also got another video from the fields on the west of this small settlement that the Russians were bombing and shelling the fields in this area of Ukrainian forces, which basically means that as a result of clashes during the previous days, the Ukrainians have established control over this part, which will give the Ukrainians also possibility to create another points of pressure and to attack the Russian forces in the vicinity of like southern part of the Staromayorska, and just today, as I understand, there's going to be a very fierce battle for the settlement, and probably if not today, then tomorrow or the day after tomorrow is going to be the last day which will determine the destiny of this region, to be more precise, the destiny of the settlement by the name of Urozhaina. If you ask my opinion, I believe that the Russians will be forced to step back, because it is very difficult to hold this settlement under Russian control. Now we are moving to Ugledar direction. Today we got also a lot of videos from this bridgehead. The Russians started, so we have seen some kind of intensifying of actions in this bridgehead from the Russian side. For example, this night, these days, the Russians start bombing the settlement using the Candelar weapons, which allows the Russians to see the situation in the settlement. Furthermore, the Russians published very interesting video also from Donetsk direction. During the previous videos, we discussed that the Russians have already improved their weapon, created new types of weapon, but this is like something like government, policy to develop the weapon, but sometimes on the ground people and soldiers try to develop the weapon by themselves and try to create the weapon they need. And for example, this is an example of the missile launcher system that was upgraded by the local forces, by the local soldiers. As you can see, there are currently 2 launch systems, 2 launch equipments, and of course it increased the power of this weapon. Furthermore, the Russian sources reported that this event didn't take place on the territory of Ukraine, but the sources are saying that the Russians are planning to use this type of weapon, these new bombs like ODAP 500, and the sources are saying that the Russians are going to start usage of this weapon very soon. This video took place in Syria, and currently the Russians are trying to develop the guided modules for this type of bombs, and after that they will start usage this type of weapon on the territory of Ukraine. From the Ukrainian side, we got another video how they destroyed and attacked the Russian tank on the south of Ugledar. So we see also some kind of intensifying of actions on this bridgehead. Either the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to attack, but when talking about the Russians, they're trying to bomb and to destroy, to reduce the Russians, the Ukrainians' defense capabilities in Ugledar, and the Ukrainians meanwhile try to destroy the Russian forces in the behind this main Russian offensive fist in the vicinity of Volnovakha, Volodymyrovka, Pavlovka, and so on. Also, we got another video from north of Novomikhailivka. The Russians continue their offensive, their artillery preparation in the settlement. And this night, the Russians published the video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions in this stronghold. We are not going to see the full video, watch the full video, because of violence and dead bodies of Ukrainian soldiers in these strongholds and trenches. But if we increase the number of updates that we got from this bridgehead for the previous few weeks, we see that the Russians are bombing and shelling this area heavily with all types of weapons they have, with artillery systems, with the Lemur missiles of Russian Mi-24 helicopters, with TOS flamethrower systems. If you remember, a few weeks ago there was update that the Russians have already captured these trenches, these strongholds, but the Ukrainians launched a counter-offensive operation. The Russians were forced to step back. So as I understand now, the Russians are trying to repeat that operation, and after a few days more of artillery preparation, they will launch another offensive operation in this direction, and they will try to force the Ukrainians to step back in direction of the northern part of Novomikhailivka. Anyway, the battle of Novomikhailivka and Ugledar continues. Now we're moving further to Pokrovsk. Today the sources published the video of the results of Russian strikes in this settlement. As you can see, this Pokrovsk, Krasnoyarsk used to be the title, has the title of Krasnoarmeysk, is a very important logistical area, logistical hub that Ukrainians used to supply and support the Ukrainian forces in Avdiivka and Krasnogorovka. So you see these railways, and these railways, one railway goes to Avdiivka through Achertina, and another railway goes to Kurakhova and to Krasnogorovka. So this is the most important logistical hub for this area, and we know that currently the Russians are trying to attack and develop their offensive operation in the direction of Krasnogorovka. We discussed this battle for many times, and of course the Russians expect the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation in the northern part of Avdiivka. And for these purposes, the Ukrainians have redeployed significant number of reserves of munitions, military experts, Western volunteers in the settlement. The Russians managed to discover and to destroy that area. So that means that probably the Russians will try to counterattack this area as well, and will try to force the Ukrainians to step back or to get more gains in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka and Avdiivka as well. Now we're moving to Bakhmut area, to Artyomovsk. The Russians also reported that they launched a series of counter-offensive operations in the vicinity of Klishchiivka, and as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians were forced to step back, at least from this small settlement. Currently, so Klishchiivka is under complete Russian control. Just probably few villages, few buildings are in the gray zone, and there are not even a single building is under Ukrainian control. The Ukrainians from their side currently changed their focus from Klishchiivka, and currently they try to develop their bridgehead in this between Kurdyumovka and Klishchiivka, so they try to develop this area. The Ukrainians are trying to attack in direction of Zelenopolye, Kurdyumovka from the northwest. The Ukrainians are trying to develop their offensive operation in direction of the railways that connects Kurdyumovka and Andreevka. The Ukrainians continue suppressing and attacking the Russian forces in Andreevka. We discussed a lot of updates about that, but yet they haven't managed to get any success from this operation. Now we are moving to the northern flank of this area. If you remember, those few days, the Ukrainians were trying to penetrate the Russians' defense belt and to enter Yahidne and Berkhovka. The Ukrainians were completely defeated. They lost significant number of forces. According to the Russians, they lost at least 4 tanks and around 7 armored vehicles. Just the first minutes, first hours of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost 2 tanks and 4 personal carriers. And as you can see, the pictures of these clashes on this bridgehead. And the Russians saved control over this territory. And now we're moving further to the Kupiansk front line. We also got a lot of updates from this bridgehead. The Russians launched another offensive operation in this area, but not from, let's say, Valshany, Pershatravnya, Petropavlovka, not from this direction as we discussed yesterday. But currently the Russians are trying to attack the Ukrainians in direction of Ivanovka, and probably this is the first settlement on the Kupiansk front line, more or less big settlement or village that the Russians will try to capture. And we see that there is a railways that goes from Kupiansk to Kislovka, Kotlarovka, and then goes to Novoselovska, and it's highly unlikely that the Russians will try to cross these railways because it's a very difficult operation, but the Russians do have possibility to establish control over these fields between the railways and the road N26, and this is exactly what the Russians are trying to implement currently by attacking in direction of Ivanovka. They will try to force the Ukrainians to step back. They will try to create the small local bridgehead. They will try to dig in deeper, and they will continue their offensive operation, trying to capture the fields between Petropavlovka, Ivanovka, let's go Sinkovka, Alshane. Furthermore, the sources published the photo of the Russian progress in this area. You see these yellow dots. Every single yellow dot is the small stronghold among the fields in this area that were captured by the Russians during the previous days of offensive operation. So as as you can see, the Russians are pushing using the broad frontline attack, and they're getting closer and closer to the N26 road and the railways that connects, let's say, Kupiansk and Kislovka. Furthermore, the Russians published another video of attacking, bombing and shelling Kislovka. This is settlement very important for the Ukrainians. This is the northern defense belt. Yes, it works. Okay, this is the Kislovka. The Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian personal carrier or armored vehicle that were moving along the streets, and as a result of anti-tank strike, that armored vehicle was destroyed. And this is not the first video that we got from this settlement. At least during the previous few days, we got at least few updates from the same settlement there, and the Russians are attacking the Ukrainians on the same street. So this is the edge Ukrainian defense positions, and the main important benefit that Ukrainians have is the railways. Currently, I don't see any chances for the Russians to cross the railways and to attack and capture the settlement, but anyway, they can establish control over the northern settlements like Ivanovka and Stepovo-Novoselovka. Over these two settlements, and currently, as I understand, this is the primary goal for the Russians. Furthermore, we got more updates of Lancet strikes behind the main scene, behind the main area of clashes. We're talking about the area in the vicinity on the eastern part of Kupiansk. For some reason, video is don't want to be uploaded. Anyway, there was an Lancet strike, and as a result of that Lancet strike, the Ukrainians lost another artillery system. So as we can see, the Russians launched significant number of offensive, counter-offensive operations. The only area where the Ukrainians are attacking is Vremivka tactical bridgehead, and today probably they're going to be able to get some success in Urozhaine. But when talking about Orekhov, Ugledar, when talking about Artyomovsk and Kupiansk, these are the areas where the Russians are counter-attacking and probably are going to develop their bridgeheads and to take more territories from the Ukrainian side. Furthermore, we got very interesting updates today from Africa, from Niger. As you know, these days the Victoria Nuland visited this country, and she made some negotiation with some meetings with the new Niger authorities, and they were talking a lot. And Nuland said that she did not have the opportunity to meet with the coup leader, but she also threatened to the Niger authorities to force it to refuse the cooperation with Russia. As you know, there are at least 2 military bases on the territory of this African country, the military base of United States of America and France, of course, and neither the France nor the United States of America want to lose this important logistic hub, because the Western countries were using those airports for redeployment of their forces and also for supplying and supporting Ukraine with Western weapons. And basically that was the reason of the visit of that person in that country. They are trying to have negotiations and trying to force the Niger not to break the agreements with the United States of America. But as you know, recently the officials of Niger asked France to leave the territory of Niger, and and this is probably the very noisy bell for the United States of America. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.